Hello and welcome to the very first installment of Virginia Wine and Song for the year 2026. It is now January 17th, 2026, and we're off to a good start here with music at least. Before I get into this month's edition of Virginia Wine and Song, I am going to be pairing a Virginia wine with a classic, underrated piece of vinyl from the classic rock era, which once again I believe is 1963 to 1999. So before I get into that, I just want to do a quick background. I wanted to shoot this video as a tribute to the Grateful Dead, mainly because we recently lost Bob Weir, who is one of the final remaining original members of the Grateful Dead. He passed away a few weeks ago, about a week and a half ago or so. In 2024, we lost Phil Lesh, and of course in 1995 we lost Jerry Garcia. So and then in 1990 we lost Brent Hyland. I'm not even one of the biggest fans of the Grateful Dead. I kind of got into them much later on in my music appreciation years, which are when I turned 30 or so. So I went to a record store today to try to find some Grateful Dead records, and they didn't have any. I went to a used record store in my town, and they had a section that said Grateful Dead, a divider in their record rack area under the G's, but there were no Grateful Dead albums to be found. So obviously other people had the same idea I had. After Bob Weir died, they all wanted to go to a record store and get a couple of Grateful Dead records. So I wasn't able to find a Grateful Dead record. I'm still going to do a little bit of a tribute to the Grateful Dead on this installment, but we're going to be talking about another piece of vinyl. But just before I dive into it, in 2025, we lost quite a few significant musicians, and I think unfortunately that trend is going to continue probably, and God only knows who's going to be departing in 2026. I mean, I shudder to think, because all the classic rockers from the era that I just described, 1963 to 1999, a lot of them are getting old, very old in some cases. We don't know how much longer they're going to be around. I mean, they may be very wealthy in many cases, but you can't really buy longevity with wealth. So just a couple names of people who passed away in the year 2025. Bob Weir passed away in 2026, so I'm going to put a shout out to him. But in 2025, we lost Rick Derringer, who was a guitarist for Steely Dan and also the Edgar Winter Group. We lost Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. That was a big loss. We lost Sly Stone. We lost Ozzy Osbourne. We lost Marianne Faithfull. We lost Rick Davies of the band Supertramp. We lost Sam Moore from Sam and Dave, the classic duo Sam and Dave. We lost Steve the Colonel Cropper, who is a great guitarist who was in Booker T and the MGs and the Blues Brothers. And quite a few more. I didn't want to name them all, but it was pretty sad. Some of these were, well, a lot of them were sad. But depending on how you feel about some of these artists, I know a lot of people were affected by Ozzy Osbourne's death. A lot of people were affected, of course, by Brian Wilson and Sly Stone. So just sad. And Phil Lesh passed away in 2024. We just lost Bob Weir earlier in 2026, a few weeks ago. So on that note, I'm going to talk about the wine first, and then I'm going to go into the music. So the wine I'm going to be talking about is a wine, once again, I wouldn't really call it the Shenandoah Valley. It's kind of on the cusp of the Shenandoah Valley. It's outside of Front Royal, not too far from the town of Front Royal, off of Route 522, US Highway 522, in an area called Chester Gap. And the winery is very appropriately named Chester Gap. Chester Gap Cellars. And this is a winery that I believe has, if not the best view in Virginia, definitely one of the best views in Virginia. It is not a very busy winery. There are a couple other wineries in the vicinity that are a lot more busy. I think this winery is starting to get busier. They do have new owners. The original owner sold the winery, I think, in 2016 or 17 or so. And the original owner was a lot more subdued and a lot quieter. He didn't really have a lot of wines. He didn't have a lot of places to hang out in. He was more of a kind of like operating in his own backyard type of winery. The new owners have really done wonders with it. They've created a lot of picnic areas. They actually built a new parking lot at the top of the hill because parking was kind of cramped before, so they have a new parking lot. So the new owners are doing a great job with this winery, and it's called Chester Gap. And like I said, one of the best views in Virginia. You're literally at the edge of the Gap, which is a little village. Like I said, it's outside of Front Royal on the way toward Sperryville on Route 522. And you're sitting out there, they have a deck, and you're on the deck, and it almost looks like, you almost feel like you can touch the mountains. That's how close the mountains are. And these are rolling mountains. These are the mountains that are the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it's a beautiful, no homes built into these mountains, or no buildings, or no power lines. It's just raw beauty. And it's a great place to hang out, especially in warmer weather. In colder weather, like in January, today is pretty cold out because it's the middle of January. They do have an indoor area as well. They do have heaters, I think. You know, if you want to go out there with your jackets on, you can be under the heaters and you can enjoy the view from there. But I do like this winery. I've been going to this winery even when it was owned by the original this German guy, kind of grumpy German guy who used to own the winery. I've been going to this winery since he was the owner. Now they have new owners, like I said. This is a Viognier. They've had a Viognier on their menu for many, many years. I mean, even the original owners did a Viognier as well. And I'm glad to see that the new owners are continuing that style. This is one of the better wineries that do Viognier. Viognier used to be a wine you could find at a lot of Virginia wineries because it is considered to be the Virginia signature white grape Viognier. And when I first started getting into wineries back in 2003 or so, I noticed that most of the wineries I went to had a Viognier. As the word got out about Virginia wineries and they became more popular, a lot of wineries stopped producing Viognier because they're not as popular as the Chardonnay or the Pinot Gris or the Sauvignon Blanc. They're definitely an acquired taste. I think Viogniers are, myself included. If a Viognier is done right, though, I really do like it, and they do a good Viognier here. Let me tell you what they have currently on their tasting list here. They have a Petit Verdot. They have a Chardonnay. They have a Chardonnay Reserve. They have both a Viognier and a Viognier Reserve. The Viognier Reserve is about $5 more than the regular Viognier. And the Viognier Reserve is probably aged differently and may taste even better. I think I tried the Viognier Reserve when I was there. I tried both the Viognier Reserve and the Viognier, and I actually preferred the Viognier. Not because I was a cheapskate and I wanted to buy something a little less expensive, but I just like the taste of it better. Everybody's palate is different. That's the thing about wine. You can buy an $8 bottle of wine from Food Lion or Trader Joe's and have a great experience with an $8 bottle of wine, and then you can go and buy, a $50 bottle of wine somewhere, and you may not be as blown away by a $50 bottle of wine. So it's all subjective. That's what I love about wines and wineries. They have a rosé. They have, of course, a Cab Franc. Couldn't be a Virginia winery unless they had a Cab Franc. So Chester Gap, they actually have more wines than the original owner did. The original owner, I think, only had a Chardonnay, a Cab Franc, a Viognier, and I think he had a Petit Verdot. I think that's all they had originally. And the new owners really have expanded the list. They also do shipping. They have really taken this winery in this beautiful location and just opened it up. Like I said, a lot of places to sit. In warm weather, if you can't get a spot on the deck looking over the mountains, they've got a couple of Adirondack chairs that are on the lawn. They've got a couple of fire pits out there. They've got another building that I think where they do the crush pad, and they've got a couple of tables and chairs over there. A lot of space a lot of areas to stretch out. They have a food truck usually on the premises. Again, I'm talking about warm weather. I'm not sure if they have a food truck in the middle of January, but bring your own food. I'm sure they encourage you to bring your own food if they don't have their snacks there. I think they do have snacks like cheese and crackers and whatnot. So anyway, go to Chester Gap. Like I said, there are a lot of other wineries in this area of the Front Royal area. There are a couple of wineries that are to the east of Front Royal. There are a couple that are to the south, and there are a couple that are to the west. This one is kind of to the southeast a little bit, like I said, off of US Highway 522. Nothing against the other wineries in the area that are very popular and crowded. Those are great too, but don't overlook Chester Gap. Make sure you do check them out because you will be in for a treat. If you've never been to this winery, you will love it. So what, does the Grateful Dead really go with Chester Gap? Maybe so. I've actually heard the Grateful Dead playing there. I think they have a speaker, and they have the speaker, I think, on Tidal. One of those music streaming channels, Tidal. I don't think it's Spotify. I think they got rid of Spotify and they moved over to Tidal, which a lot of people are doing now, just because I think Tidal has a lot more variety. And I think I went there and I did hear them. I think they were playing the Grateful Dead one time when I was there. But like I said, I don't have the Grateful Dead on vinyl. I don't have any Grateful Dead vinyl. I will try to rectify that, and if I do, I will shoot another video, a proper tribute. So in the meantime, I'm going to talk about a band that I think you may hear at Chester Gap as well, because they're very similar. I think there are a couple of correlations between the band that I decided to focus on and the Grateful Dead. This band, especially their earlier albums, they are known for kind of going into impromptu jams. They weren't really yacht rock. They later became more yacht rock, and I don't like that term, yacht rock, but this band is unfortunately lumped in with the yacht rock category. In fact, when I bought this record a couple of months ago at this record store, they had a yacht rock section, which that's where I found this album. So I decided to focus on the band, the Doobie Brothers. And the Doobie Brothers, like I said, their early albums, I think were, the Grateful Dead, their peak period, I think, was 1966, 67, all the way to, when they were really considered to be the trailblazers of the scene, I think from 67 to maybe like 73. After that, of course, the Grateful Dead were still around. They were still making albums. They were still touring. But I think their real influence on culture, especially music culture, especially West Coast music culture, was between the years of 1966 and 1972. And this album is Toulouse Street. This is Toulouse Street by the Doobie Brothers. And this album came out, I believe, in 1971. Let me look. They don't have the year listed on the album. I think that was a big thing for albums that were pressed in the early 70s. They didn't put the year of release on the records. So let me see. Doobie Brothers, Toulouse Street. I should have had this. 72. I was off by a year. This came out in 1972. And that was right around the time that the Doobie Brothers started becoming popular on the radio. They had another album before this, but this is the album that kind of blew them open. So not only did they do a lot of jams during their concerts, they're also starting to be played on AM radio. And this actually has their first hit on it. This album has their first hit, which is Listen to the Music. Listen to the Music is, if the Grateful Dead ever wanted to do a pop song in that era, in 1972, if the Grateful Dead decided to do a radio-friendly pop song, it probably would sound a lot like Listen to the Music. It's just a happy song that produces great vibes, and it just puts a smile on your face. And that's what the Grateful Dead were known for. They were known for that. And a lot of people think the Grateful Dead were kind of elitist. They considered their fans to be kind of snobby and blah, blah, blah. And I thought that initially too. When I was in my 20s, I never got the whole Deadhead thing. But like I said, as I got older, I really started to appreciate them. And I believe, the Doobie Brothers were, I think they were Southern. I don't think they were from San Francisco. The Doobie Brothers were originally from I was close, San Jose. The Doobie Brothers were from San Jose, so they were from the Bay Area. So I'm sure they were good friends with the Grateful Dead. The Doobie Brothers, because they were, like I said, their first album, I believe, came out in 1970. This album came out in 1972. Listen to the Music. The other song that was on the radio from this album was Rockin' Down the Highway, which is very kind of representative of what they did in concert. Just really jammy type songs with strong structures and wonderful instrumentation and great percussion, and just songs that really just make you feel good. That's what they were all about. And this album also has a couple of deep tracks that are really great. I love that song Disciple. There's a real Dead-like song on here called Disciple, which is about 6 minutes long, and it is an experience. It's a wonderful song. Tom Johnston wrote that one. Tom Johnston was one of the mainstays of the Doobie Brothers, and I think he's still touring, believe it or not, with the Doobie Brothers this very day. You also have a song Toulouse Street, which is the title track. That's a Pat Simmons song. Really atmospheric, a very New Orleans type feel. Of course, New Orleans was the inspiration for this album title. So, great album, very Dead-like, I think. I've played it on vinyl. I do have this on CD as well. It's not a remastered CD. but it's a CD. But I believe that the vinyl is really in great shape. The vinyl, this is their vinyl. This is the Warner Brothers. They call it the Burbank label because it has the palm trees along Burbank, some road in Burbank. Produced by Ted Templeman. Ted Templeman was, of course, the big producer for the Doobies. So a wonderful record. You can play it, like I said, on Tidal or any streaming service. You can probably even listen to it on YouTube if you want to. Toulouse Street by the Doobie Brothers is a classic album. It's actually my favorite album by them. I wish they would do a pressing on MoFi. It was on MoFi, Mobile Fidelity, about 15 or 20 years ago, but it's no longer available. It's out of print on MoFi, so unfortunately. But since we're talking about MoFi, I do have a couple of Doobie Brothers on MoFi. This is what were once vices are now habits. And I bring up this MoFi album mainly because this album, which is it's pressed in MoFi, which is SACD. Besides Toulouse Street, I would say this is the closest thing they put out to a Grateful Dead record. This is more of the kind of laid back American Beauty type Grateful Dead, you know, kind of melodic, more pop oriented in their approach to music. Not really jammy. There are a couple of jams on here, but it's like I said, it's more laid back California, almost, you know, Topanga Canyon type rock, mellow. I don't want to say mellow, just, and I don't want to say smooth because smooth is yacht rock. Just very great vibes, positive vibes. You just feel like, you know, very Crosby, Stills and Nash-like. You just organic is the word I'm looking for, I guess. And that's what this album is. And the Grateful Dead were like that, but they are also very jammy, and they rocked out and they had long guitar solos, and they really try to create live experiences, live music experiences. And I think this album, what were once vices are now habits, is the closest thing to the Doobie Brothers doing an album like that by the Grateful Dead. And this album came out in 1974, and this has Black Water, which is a real big hit for them, #1 hit, very surprise #1 hit actually. There's a long story about Black Water, about how that became such a hit, which I won't get into. You can look that up, but this is also a great record. I usually, you know, I don't have this on vinyl, but I wanted to pull it out because I have it in MoFi SACD. And I believe it's still available if you want to order it. And then, of course, the Doobie Brothers had a whole bunch of other albums as well. But these are the ones that I think would go really, really well with good old Chester Gap. What were once vices are now habits. Were now habits. Kind of a weird title. And then Toulouse Street. Anyway, those are great Doobie Brothers records to listen to. Very close to the experience of the Grateful Dead. And I will close by saying that I do have a couple of Grateful Deads. I wanted to have vinyl. So I like to focus on vinyl when I shoot these videos. You know, CDs are not as impactful, I don't think, in a visual sense, because albums, you know, they have the cover art. But anyway, this is Working Man's Dead, and this is American Beauty. These are the two. I have a couple of their albums on CD actually, the Grateful Dead, but these are two MoFis, Mobile Fidelities, they sound really great. And these both came out the same year, by the way. These both came out, I think, in 1970. So can you imagine that? Putting two great records out the same year? That's just incredible. So the Grateful Dead, what can you say? I mean, we still have Mickey Hart left, and we still have Bill Kreutzmann. They are the percussionists. So I guess if you play percussion or drums for the Grateful Dead, you live longer. You know, it's sad, really. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Let's hope we have a year that we don't lose any more great musicians. You know, let's just hope. Anyway, have a great rest of your winter. We will see you again next month.